Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about the second most important relationship of the 21st century, and that is the relationship between Russia and China. The first most important relationship is between me and your mom. Oh! It took me like 5 tries of me giggling before I managed to pull it off without smiling first. So, mission accomplished. So, back to the second most important relationship of the 21st century, we have this Twitter thread about how the relationship between Russia and China. So, you can't browse YouTube without encountering Western wet dreams, fantasies of pitting China against Russia. And so, this is one of my biggest pet peeves because I think there is near zero chance of that ever occurring. It doesn't make sense for either Russia or China, and I'm going to tell you why if this Twitter thread does not tell you why. So, from the West perspective, China has an inherent grudge against Russia for lost land in the Northeast. So, this is going to overview the complex relationship between China and Russia. So, you see here all these videos trying to drive a wedge between Russia and China, and it's just simply not going to work. So there's indeed some resentment in China over the territory seized, but any attempts at weakening Russia to get land back will be the biggest geopolitical mistake China makes. Now, I've talked about this before, and the reason is because China has always wanted a secure northern border. That's why they built things like the Great China Wall, and because China's wind conditions revolve around the east and south of their country, so the South China Sea types of areas, because they want to be a major trade power and they want to have free access to those waters to be able to trade all across the world. And so for them, they need to keep quiet, keep secure the other borders that are not in that southeastern direction. China's land borders are extremely defensible, it says. There are only 2 viable routes on land to attack China's economic, industrial, and population core. So we see the economic and population core is this red area here, and they're showing the 2 land areas that could be used to attack these 2 locations. Okay, so in the north, you have through Manchuria via Beijing, then Central Plains and south through Vietnam. Okay, so what they want to do is have secure ties with both Vietnam and with Russia to make sure that there's no land-based way to attack their major economic hubs, their population centers, right? That makes complete sense so far. Hence why China has fought for North Korea and Vietnam in their wars against the United States. So they're trying to protect those 2 land routes into their population centers. During the Sino-Soviet split, China experienced what it's like to have a hostile northern neighbor. So that, I would say at this point, I think they would agree with me, was a huge mistake for both of them because they allowed the United States to drive a wedge between them. And I think there were some justifiable reasons on China's part because it did not sound like the Soviet Union really took them seriously, really understood that they could still be a power again because China was the dominant power of the world for most of human history. And the Soviet Union was very dismissive, very derogatory, very hostile to a large extent towards China. But the point is, neither of these countries really benefited from that division there. So during the Sino-Soviet split, China experienced what it's like to have a hostile northern neighbor. Man-made fortress mountains were built in the plains of Inner Mongolia, north of Beijing, acting as the first line of defense aimed at slowing the Soviet torrent. Then if the Soviets reached the mountains northwest of Beijing, then the capital was to be evacuated. So again, very, very concerning that they had to worry about this. What they want to do is they want to have a secure northern and southern land routes, so through Russia and through Vietnam, so that they could focus on becoming a naval power. So because the United States has so much money to throw around, China has to specialize, and they've chosen to specialize in things that would actually benefit them in the South China Sea theater of war. And so to have these other theater of war, such as more land warfare, would not be to their benefit because they've not specialized in that. And so the United States would have advantages because the United States doesn't really specialize. It tries to do absolutely everything. And if you're fighting in a variety of different theaters of war, I guess that makes sense. But if you're China and you only have a finite amount of money and you have to specialize, you want to specialize in the things that are beneficial for your wind conditions. So hence South China Sea. And so for them, it is extremely bad if Vietnam was flipped to help the United States, or if Russia was fragmented or flipped to help the United States, because then those borders, they'd have to split their attention, split their focus, and they're just not prepared for that type of conflict. So it goes on to say, after which a scorched earth tactics will be fought defensively in the Central Plains. Monumental efforts were given to relocate industries from the northern border with the Soviets to the mountains in the southwest. So again, just not good for them. It's a lot of work. It's very difficult. And so they need a stable northern border, especially because they wouldn't have access to that natural gas. And if Russia was unstable, there was instability within their country, they would not have access to that energy resource, to the natural resources. Because remember, I've talked about in prior videos how Russia has the most natural resources of any country in the world. And a flipped Russia, working for the United States, or fractured Russia, just working for anyone who hires them or whatever, is not good, because China, at minimum, loses access to those resources, okay? So as you can see, we would rather have a friendly northern neighbor. So the Machiavellian among you may ask, why not weaken Russia and let it fragment? Okay, so she's going to talk about likely what I just talked about. If that were the case, then China will be looking at NATO vassal states on our northern border, which is way worse. So again, not only do you lose access to those resources, but some of those fragmented states could be working for the United States, which is exactly what we saw with the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union, that some of those fragmented Soviet Union states ended up flipping to the United States and working against Russia. So for China to reclaim lands of outer Manchuria, we may gain 300 kilometers of buffer space in some very fertile land. Our northeast will get access to sea, but unironically, at what cost? So they talk about this all the time in Western media. They say, like, China built trains, but at what cost? China gave free food to people, but at what cost? China gives whatever and whatever, but at what cost? But now they're talking about it unironically, which I think is funny. NATO lands forces on our land border aside. Okay, so they're talking about, aside from NATO co-opting the resource, or co-opting the territory and the population, ports on the Sea of Japan will require China to raise another fleet to protect the long coastline. So that's exactly the opposite of what China wants. China would much rather only focus on the South China Sea, and it doesn't want to focus that far north. So they would be overextending themselves, having to build another fleet and having to prepare for more and more military conflicts on land instead of preparing for military conflicts primarily on sea. And so it just does not benefit China to have that extra territory. It would just be overextending itself to take that outer Manchuria territory that Russia claimed in prior conflicts. And so this fleet that would have to be built up in the Sea of Japan type of area will be completely cut off by sea from the rest of China's naval forces. So in essence, you just created a new avenue of attack into China for the United States and Japan. So see here, the territory here up, I mean, you'd have South Korea and Japan, and that area over there that has its own naval port would be blocked in by Japan and South Korea there. So obviously you do not want to have to build a navy in that Sea of Japan area to come into conflict. You'd rather have a navy come up from the south, from the South China Sea direction, and come up north to South Korea and Japan if you had to come into conflict with them. So both from a naval perspective and just a land-based military perspective, the army perspective, it would just not be good to overextend themselves in that direction. On top of the fact that they would lose those natural resources from Russia, and they would have NATO potential allies on its border. So weakening Russia, fragmenting Russia is just not good overall. This is why political hacks and commentators with zero geopolitical knowledge think they can split China and Russia. This is what I've talked about when it comes to they either have to be paid or complete morons to believe this type of thing. When in reality, the West will never accept a unified and nuclear-armed Russia as a client state. And we've seen this because Russia came to the United States with open arms after dismantling, de-arming the Soviet Union. They fragmented their own empire and said, listen, we want to join NATO, we want to join the West. And the West said, yeah, maybe we'll think about it. And then they just kept encroaching on Russia, and they kept talking about Russia as an enemy, and we have to fragment them, we have to destroy them, we have to take their natural resources. So it's like, we know from experience, you don't have to guess at this, that the United States, the West, will never accept a unified and nuclear-armed Russia. Period. We know this. We know this from the 90s. Nor would China betray our geopolitical goals for some farmland. That's exactly what I'm thinking, where it's like, you don't understand how nation building works, how empire building works, if you think they would take that extra territory and give up its aspirations to become a world power, because that's exactly what they would be doing for a little bit of extra farmland. So Zhao Deishua, I really need to learn how to pronounce Mandarin words. She goes on to say, our strategic focus is in the global commons of oceans. The island of Taiwan and South China Sea are vital for the realization of that goal. So really interesting stuff going on here. And hopefully that helped to remove the veil, remove the lenses of propaganda that you've been fed, this vile propaganda trying to pit a wedge between Russia and China. It's just never going to work because of the things outlisted in this Twitter thread and things that I went over. So do not believe Western propaganda. The West is in terminal decline and they want to bring the rest of the world with it. Thank you so much for investing your time in watching this video. If you found the content informative, be sure to show your support by giving us an upvote. Your engagement goes a long way in boosting our visibility within the algorithm. To stay ahead on the most pressing contemporary issues, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're committed to delivering up-to-date, thought-provoking content on a daily basis, and we want you to be a part of this journey. Also, your thoughts matter to us, so please share any comments, questions, concerns, and/or critiques in the comment section below. I personally read each one and I respond when necessary. Given the nature of our content, where we expose the actions of the oligarchs who exploit the masses, intentional suppression in the algorithm is an unfortunate reality. If you believe in our mission, you can help by spreading the word. Tell your friends about our content. Let's amplify the voices of those that challenge the status quo. Speaking of amplifying voices, I need your help. As many of you know, I gave up a lucrative career in the fastest growing field and the highest paying subfield of psychology in the United States to move to the Philippines to provide content that I think is important for my viewers to hear. I left so I could avoid repercussions for speaking about topics that are taboo in the United States. This decision came with significant financial sacrifices, but your support can help sustain the work we do. Check out the links in the description for how to support our channel. Every contribution, big or small, is genuinely appreciated. Finally, as a channel, we stand with the people of Palestine. We believe in their freedom, and by supporting us, you can contribute to this shared vision. Thank you for being a part of our community. Your viewership is invaluable, and I genuinely hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.